some thought about, and in many cases, change. How's that for right? All right. Does anyone else have a question while you're out? Yes. Why do I draw with Sharpie instead of pencil? Primarily because I think it's easier to see on the screen. But I don't work with a Sharpie. I work with blending pens, or I work with color when I'm drawing, for the books and stuff like that. If you want a tool that is really ideally suited to your hand, but you don't think about it. It's just an extension of your hand. So you want just what feels right. It doesn't really matter what it is, but for me it's about the hand and or a crayon, pencil crayon. So whatever feels right. The problem with pencils is that you're probably thinking, okay, if I make a mistake, I can correct it. But you don't make mistakes. You just veer it off slightly. You lost concentration for a moment. But don't erase it. Use your eraser as a drawing tool, not necessarily as a fixing up tool. Not necessarily you can get rid of something that you're not happy with, and think will embarrass you if you show it to groups of small children or make you laugh. Forget that. Don't even worry about it. Just keep going on the same drawing. And part of what makes the drawing interesting is not that you were able to absolutely capture perfectly an architectural thing, but that you somehow describe the process in the drawing of how you got there. And in the end, it sort of looks like what you were at. But there are all these little sort of, you might describe them as dead ends, or you might describe them even as mistakes and errors, but I wouldn't get rid of them. I would keep them. And if you're a little tentative, my one suggestion would be draw light to start. Don't use a Sharpie because there's no going back. When you make a mark with a Sharpie, it's there forever. If you're a little hesitant, don't press down somewhere. And then when you know you're on the right, you've got the right angle or something, or it feels right, then darken it up a little bit. But don't get rid of the stuff under it, because that's what makes drawings, that's what keeps them alive. This is not about trying to mimic what the camera can do. If you want to take a picture, you take a picture. But if you want to experience, trying to understand through the process of drawing, hold on to all the marks, hold on to all the marks. Let them be part of the process. You can, obviously, when you get to a certain point, you can bring some down with the eraser if you want, but you shouldn't constantly be saying, oops, that's on, erasing, oops, that's on, erasing. You'll never get anywhere. So just, it's a building process. Yes. Most of the books, the size of most of the drawings increasingly are the size they are reproduced into the book. Mostly because I don't have time to work larger. I have a tendency to procrastinate to the point where there is none of that luxury of working bigger. So I'm working actual size. Yes. Right. Well, drawing something from your imagination means that you have drawn so much stuff beforehand that you know how to handle it. If there are spatial considerations, if it has to look like something that's got volume, got some depth, then you know how to do that because you've drawn buildings and things of that nature, even though it could be a complete fantasy, a complete fabrication. You want to give it a sense of reality, you want to give it a sense of presence. And you've been developing your drawing skills by drawing peppers and oranges and blocks, and then buildings and street scenes and so on and so forth. People, nothing harder to draw than a human being. Nothing more complex. That's what I avoid it as much as possible, ironically, and even though I'm doing this work. You have to get the tools in your head, and that's what gives you the freedom to draw complete tasks. And you can either decide to not use the stuff you've learned that would make it look more realistic, or to use it, or to use a combination of that sort of the stuff that solidifies the information, the stuff that keeps it more ethereal, more magical, more fantastic. Yes? Is there any role for computers in my book production process? Yes and no. Not for drawing. Not at all. But for writing. And see, I write and illustrate at the same time. So I'm always going to the computer and reworking a piece of text, either because something I learned in the drawing told me that the text was inadequate or wrong, or to work on the size of the piece of text and make sure it fits in the design of the drawing. Each of those pieces of text is a part of your image, and it has to be thought of as part of the total composition, as part of the total design. So the computer is a fantastic tool for that, but I would never, ever let it interfere with the act of drawing. It has nothing to do with drawing. I think when they use the word imaging, you're right. I would call it imaging, but I would never call it drawing. It's not drawing. Drawing is that very personal connection, and it's about seeing. It's not about manipulating a tool. It's about seeing, and this tool that is a natural extension of your hand is a minimally intrusive thing. Is simply ready to go. But if your brain and your eye working together to learn about that thing in front of you. So the computer's great for somebody who knows what they're after because they've done a lot of drawing. They really know when something looks right or doesn't look right, and then you try to get the computer, if you want, to imitate that as closely as possible. But I would never use it, personally, as a drawing tool. I don't think computers draw. Otherwise, I have no problem. Do I also design spaces? No, I rearrange the studio on a regular basis, but I do not design spaces. I never practiced architecture. Graduated from university in 1969 with a degree in architecture, but my name is spelled wrong on the degree. So I felt I was free. I never actually had to do it. So, yes, one more question. Go ahead. You have two questions, that's what I know. Two more questions. Why did I put magnets in the way things work? Simply because they crept into my thinking. I was trying to explain super machines, and I realized that these machines have only been around forever. At least since cave times. I mean, I'm talking about logs and rocks and using them for leverage and so on. And so I drew some cave people around some logs and rocks. There's a dog sitting right in front of me. It's been amazing doing this whole thing. I know it's been taking a year, but don't leave a piece of paper and a Sharpie around the bush. And so there, I took these mountains in the background with these people. And then I thought, it would be interesting if they tried to break the mountain. They could get this mountain on the log, and then the whole village could stand on the other end of the log. Know that when it was horizontal, the weight of one, and that would match the weight of the other. That's how the mountain came into the book. And I thought, we'll just use it in the first section. It's all about the super machines, and then it'll blow away. But the publishers looked at the mountain and thought, we really should try to keep this. And I thought, we can keep it. We're going to talk about airplanes and ships, and computers, electronics, and they said, yeah, I'm sure you'll come up with a way. So anyway, the mammoth stayed. What was your last question? How many what? How many years have I been drawing? I'd say 50, drawing 55. Approximately 55 years. The first drawing I remember doing was a fire engine. I don't do those anymore.